This lesson, we'll be going over the basic concepts in the creation versus macroevolution debate. Specifically, what we'll be looking at is what this debate isn't, what it is in the two major sides, what organismal kinds are, the difference between macro and microevolution, what natural selection is, what the macroevolution side is, and then subgroups within it. Look at what the creation side is, and then subgroups within that, and finally look at the intelligent design group. First, looking at what this debate is not. It is not atheism versus theism, and it is not science versus religion or pseudoscientific myth. What it really is worldview versus worldview. And the first worldview is macroevolution, which believes that macroevolution exists to at least some degree. And then the other worldview being creation, which disbelieves macroevolution exists entirely. Let's look at some terms that are commonly used in this debate, starting with organismal kinds. These are classified groups of organisms that have the same ultimate fundamental function and structure and are distinguished from other organisms that don't have this in common. So like all human beings essentially have that skeleton on the left and no other organism does. And essentially all great apes have that skeleton on the right, which is particularly a gorilla skeleton, and no other organism has that sort of skeleton. Final terms we'll look at before we get into the two sides specifically, and that is macroevolution and microevolution. Macroevolution is drastic change in an organism's lineage that creates a descendant with an entire structure and function fundamentally different from the ancestor. So you have an ancestor that's one kind, and through changes, drastic ones, in the lineage, you can get a descendant that's a different kind. Like going from a monkey, having drastic changes down through the lineage, and then getting an ape, and then so on, getting a human. And overall, you can kind of think of it as like changing a triangle to a square by adding on another side. You're creating a drastic change, adding a whole nother side and therefore angle, going and then going from a triangular shape, 3 sides, 3 angles, to a fundamentally different shape, quadrilateral, with 4 sides and 4 angles. And this is way different from microevolution or speciation, which is creation of species, where there's only slight to moderate change in organism's lineage that makes the descendant a different species from the ancestor, but still has the same fundamental structure and function. So instead of getting one kind from another kind, you're getting an isolation within a kind, a variation isolation within the kind. So if you look at the two skulls I have pictured, they're from two different species, but as you can see, the skulls are essentially generally the same shape and size overall. And also think about getting all the breeds of dogs from one original pair of wolf-like creatures. They all still have the same basic structure, function, and so forth. So overall, you can kind of think about as like transforming a parallelogram into a square, because they're still fundamentally the same shape. They're still quadrilaterals, still 4 sides and 4 angles. But you change and alter the angles and their proportions, as well as the side proportions as well. For our terms, before we get into the specific sides, natural selection, which is isolation and removal of certain genetic information within a gene pool through extinction of organisms with traits not suitable for the environment, coupled with survival and breeding of organisms with environment suitable traits. That's a lot. So, a couple examples. One, think of a canid, so like dog or wolf or coyote population in a desert with long-haired individuals dying out before being able to breed, and short-haired individuals within that population having offspring, and therefore leading to short-haired genes being the most dominant in that population. That would be an example. And another example would be people only breeding curly-tailed canids, leading to a breed of canids, like domestic dog, with only curly-tailed genes and no straight-tailed genes. This specifically human-aimed selection is called artificial selection. On the macroevolution side, we will be looking at inorganic evolution, abiogenesis, phylogeny, and gradualism versus punctuated equilibrium. Inorganic evolution is macroevolution applied to inorganic aspects of the universe. So, for example, heavenly bodies, geological phenomena, periodic elements, and molecules, like I have in the images depicted. Biogenesis is the claim that inorganic matter evolved into organic molecules that then evolved into cells. And of course, this is unproven, and is heavily related to a theory known as spontaneous generation, which says that microbes like bacteria can just pop into existence from inorganic matter. This has been debunked on many occasions. And both abiogenesis and spontaneous generation are opposite of biogenesis, which says that life comes from like life only. And this has been proven by Louis Pasteur, who is also one of multiple scientists that have disproven spontaneous generation. Phylogeny says that at least some organisms have connected lineages and unified gene pools, and that kinds can make other kinds, can be produced from another kind. And the main view is that all kinds originate from one original kind, and within it you have Luca, aka last universal common ancestor, which is the proposed organism that every currently existing one is genetically descended from. Now, gradualism and punctuated equilibrium are two theories to the level of change between generations and number of transitional intermediate kinds between two other kinds during macroevolution. So what it is, in other words, is, for example, when it comes to ape to human macroevolution, gradualism and punctuated equilibrium are two theories to how many intermediate kinds or kinds exist in the generations between the ape ancestor and the human descendant, and how much changes exist between those two generations. And they can be illustrated in these pictures. To the left you have gradualism, to the right you have punctuated equilibrium. Now, the two theories themselves, gradualism says that there are slight changes between each of these generations, with there being many transitional/intermediate kinds between the two other very similar ones. This is the most common of the two theories and the one held by Darwin. You know, that you have all of these generations of very slight changes from one kind that's more ape-like to one that's more human-like through millions of years till you finally get from ape ancestor to human descendant. Punctuated equilibrium, which is much less common and well known to be held by Stephen Jay Gould, it says the opposite. It says that there are drastic changes between each of these generations, with there being very few transitional/intermediate kinds between these two other very similar kinds. So when it comes to groups within the macroevolution side, we'll look at third way evolution, neo-Darwinism, and then what are considered alternatives to Darwinism, but have actually been incorporated into it to some degree. Third way evolution is a very recent group that claims natural selection isn't the cause of macroevolution, but other processes are instead, such as symbiogenesis, depicted in the first image. That's where it says a cell took in other cells and just other cellular material like the mitochondria, what we call organelles. and instead of digesting them, after engulfing them, they just became part of it, forming a sort of symbiote. HGT, which is horizontal gene transfer, the 4 ways it can be done is depicted in the middle image. It's where a cell takes up pieces of genetic information and then incorporates it into its own, but without changing it into another kind of organism. Mobile DNA, which is DNA pieces that get moved throughout the strain, and epigenetics, which is where the chromosome is altered, but the genetic information itself is not, such as attaching certain molecules to the chromosome structure, such as DNA methylation, or altering its shape by bending it as well. Either way, it's changed to the chromosome, it's not changed to the DNA itself. Neo-Darwinism, which is the most common of macroevolution groups, claims that natural selection is the primary cause of macroevolution, though they do say that other processes, like the ones that were mentioned in Third Way, have contributed as well. And neo-Darwinists or neo-Darwinians also claim that macroevolution is merely just microevolution, but on a large scale. Now let's look at the deemed alternatives to Darwinism that have actually been incorporated into neo-Darwinism. There's neo-Lamarckism, which says that an organism gains a trait in its life and then passes it on. Most common thought example is think of a giraffe stretching out its neck to try and get higher up leaves in a tree, and then passing on its longer stretched out neck to its offspring. Well, this is incorporated in Darwinism because Darwinism says that an organism can have an epigenetic change in its life and then pass that on to its offspring. So that is a trait changing in the organism's life, then being passed on. There's also orthogenesis, which says that evolution tends toward creating superior organisms. This is, in a sense, incorporated in neo-Darwinism by saying that natural selection leads to creating a population of organisms that have more adaptive traits. So they do say that macroevolution does create superior organisms, just superior for that particular environment, not necessarily superior overall. And then there's mutationism slash saltationism, which says that mutation is the cause of drastic change. It's the cause of macroevolution entirely. Well, it's incorporated in neo-Darwinism through saying that mutation is the ultimate source of genetic variation. And also think of punctuated equilibrium, where you got drastic change in a short amount of time. And you're still saying that mutation is very important to drastic change in macroevolution. Creation side, we'll be looking at direct special creation and baraminology. Direct special creation, or simply special creation, says that the primary origins of most things in the universe, namely biodiversity, heavenly bodies, and periodic elements, are that they were spontaneously and supernaturally created by the divine creator, and done so partially as is, though they've gone through some change over time, but not macroevolutionary change. Baraminology says that kinds, or baramins, which is one term from the 2 Hebrew words for created kinds, have separate, unconnected, and incompatible lineages and gene pools that started from an ancestor or ancestor pair, depending on kind of organism, that was created directly and completely supernaturally by the creator. And so there's total kind isolation and only biogenesis. So unlike phylogeny, instead of starting off with one gene pool, one ancestor, it's multiple separate gene pools and you can't pour water from one to the other. That sort of thinking. The groups within the creation side include flat Earth, geocentrism, and young Earth creationists and old Earth creationists, aka YECs and OECs. Flat Earth, yes, is a creationist group, but they are extremely rare. And a lot of them are just internet trolls. Not really that many people are actually truly believe in flat Earth. Geocentrism is also a very extremely rare creationist group, and they believe that the Earth is the center of the solar system because they think the creation account is both metaphorically and literally Earth-centered because of how the Earth was made first, Sun made later, and just, you read Genesis 1 and it's very focused on the Earth. Now, YACs and OACs are nearly all creationists, because the previous two are so extremely rare. And they believe in mainstream views of science when it comes to astronomy, a lot in geology, and in geography, except for anything that has to do with macroevolution. So, yes, they believe the Earth is globular, sphere, not flat, and they do believe that the Earth is revolving around the sun. Now, the final thing we'll look at for this lesson is intelligent design, because you hear that a lot. Well, intelligent design as a movement is a very loosely associated movement composed of both macroevolution and creation believing theists that believe there is design behind the universe and its developmental history, which is the doing of the creator. So all intelligent design movement members are theists, yes, but not all are creationists. There are plenty of macroevolutionist ones. So, just because someone claims intelligent design does not make them a creationist. It just makes them a theist. Now, in this lesson, going over a quick recap. The macroevolution side, its unique beliefs are that organic matter, which would be things like cells and what makes up cells, were naturally produced from inorganic matter, which would be things like minerals and metals. They also believe that one kind of organism can produce offspring of another kind eventually, meaning that have enough changes throughout the generations after that it winds up with a descendant that's fundamentally different from itself. And most macroevolutionists, all in all, believe that everything natural in the universe originated from the same natural thing, and done so through natural processes. And then the subgroups within the side are mainly neo-Darwinism and third way. Then the creation side, its unique beliefs are that organic matter and all the elements and the first individuals of each kind, like the first ever dog creature or painted creature, were created supernaturally and distinctly, and that there's no biological relatedness between kinds, only similarity. No, like actual genealogical connections between them. And they also believe that all the unique beliefs of the macroevolution side are totally fictitious, that they're scientifically impossible and do not exist. And these subgroups within the side are mainly young Earth creationists and old Earth creationists, with minorities, very small minorities, of geocentrists and flat earthers. And then the intelligent design movement, it has members that can be part of either macroevolution or creation. It's not specifically one or the other. And finally, both macroevolutionists and creationists, believe in natural selection creating variation within kinds.